Welcome, everyone. We are here today on this beautiful Friday, November 6th, with our Windtunneling Your Business and How to Develop Robust Strategies with Scenarios. My name is Brigitta Hoeferle. I am very honored and excited to be here with you. I'm the CEO of the NLP Center of Atlanta. Before we get started, and I introduce you to a very important person that is also co-hosting this with me today, make sure that you have something to write with and something to write on, might be even your iPad. Make sure that you are turning this thing off if you're not on a call. That means if you're a doctor or a lawyer. Make sure that you're cutting out any distractions that you possibly can and be ready to take some great notes. If you do wish to receive the recording, I will upload this segment to our YouTube channel. So if you have not followed us on YouTube yet, make sure that you search on YouTube for NLP Atlanta. We put all of our free courses up on our YouTube channel, and it's a resource for you. So spread the word, subscribe to it, go through the courses that we have on here. We are going through content-rich information. We're not just going to give you fluff. That's far from what we're doing here with all of our courses. And we have some folks that have been on some of our other courses here on this call. So as you're watching the recording, you know that we're going to give you ready to implement strategies right now as we move forward. And I couldn't be more excited and more honored to be with a fellow Grandmaster, John Kurth. John Kurth is part of our faculty and he's a CEO in his own right. John, thank you for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm the president and founder of Syntactic Sales Scripting, the Syntax of Success. I'm delighted to be a faculty member at the NLP Center of Atlanta, and I'm the author of this content-rich workbook. What are your words wearing? Just in the title, you know, it's all NLP. So I'm delighted to be here. What we're going to be sharing with you today is scenarios, which is one of the most powerful strategies you can use to navigate your business through uncertain times. Brigitta, over to you.
Let's get started. I'm going to start our screen share. Can you guys see my screen really well? You can see it well? Okay, perfect. So as John and I already said, we're going to give you an overview and then go deeper into the 8 steps of the scenario planning as you are learning how to develop strategies with scenarios. So John, why don't you take it
All right,
from here?
so a little brief history of scenarios. Scenarios were first pioneered by Royal Dutch Shell, the big oil company out of the Netherlands. But the thing is, just how powerful can scenarios be? Scenarios is dealing with uncertainty, and the way they have planned that out, in 1970, Royal Dutch Shell was the 8th or 9th largest oil company in the world by billions of dollars of revenue, all those metrics. Well, they had run some scenarios. What happens if the price of oil just skyrockets? Historically, around that time, oil was about 10 bucks a barrel. Granted, that's $1970, but still 10 bucks a barrel. But they had run scenarios. What if the price of oil skyrockets? Well, in 1973, you've got the Yom Kippur War, and you've got the OPEC oil embargo. Oil skyrockets. Well, Shell had already put things into play ahead of that. And because of that and how they had a 2-year head start on their competitors. They went from number 9th to number 3rd in capitalization in just 10 years. Scenarios is one of the most powerful wind tunneling and strategy planning tools that we have. So let's talk a little more about how important scenarios are. This is a story I'll get into this in a little bit. Brigitta, you want to cover this, and then I'm going to go a little more into the scenario side of things. Okay. So just go back a second before we go into the Fulden Company one. All right, so go back to the Royal Dutch Shell. Okay, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the cone of uncertainty. That's coming later. But the thing is, scenarios, isn't this just esoteric academic approach to business strategy? It's incredibly relevant. Brigitta, pivot over to the Fooled and Company slide, please.
So when John and I have done our research and pivoted into live online training as the pandemic really hit us in March, we immediately switched from live in-person trainings to live online trainings. And Windtunneling Your Business and Scenarios was part of our strategy of teaching people what can you do to be prepared, to be more prepared, not just forecast. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but really be prepared on some facing some uncertainty. And you know, if we look back on 2020, there's one big uncertainty right there. Folding Company has created this survey. I want to say, when was that? Sometime mid this year.
It was May.
It was May this year, and we immediately picked it up. John found it, and we picked it up and put it in our presentations because it gives that immediate feedback that we are on the right track, and you are here, and you are watching, and you're starting to implement the strategies and scenarios. So the preparedness is 51%. Here the question is, my team or group has the skills and experience to provide the support my company needs to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the 51% says disagree because they were not prepared. So you being here in, as you see here, 27.4% is the scenario workshops. My group has or is contemplating deploying the following to better navigate the impact of this pandemic. And they are looking at strategy workshops, they are looking at scenario workshops, they are looking at focus groups, and then wargaming, which is the ultimate, which we're going to later on get into. So these numbers speak for you being, you're doing the right thing and you being here at the right time. So kudos to you for being here. Let's go back to wind tunneling.
Good. So remember, we're wind tunneling a business. Engineers make a mock-up of their airplane and wind tunnel it. They're able to get insight into what's working with a scale model before they go big. Scenarios provide you the opportunity to wind tunnel your business. And by wind tunneling it ahead of time, you'll get deeper insights that you can work with. So part of it is really a strategic conversation. Kees van der Heijden, who wrote the book, The Art of Strategic Conversation, was a senior scenario planner at Royal Dutch Shell. And the whole scenario process is a strategic conversation between key people at the company, at the business, because one person can't know it all. You have to have that conversation. As that ongoing conversation occurs, you're able to make adjustments. Brigitta and I now have a shorthand through our own strategic conversation, the own scenarios we have done with our own businesses. So we're making adjustments as we keep on going. So this is why this is so different than anything else you've probably seen or worked with before. Now we're going to focus on the cone of uncertainty. Brigitta mentioned 2020 is a gigantic uncertainty, but how do you manage it? How do you manage the uncertainty? Well, the cone of uncertainty is perfect for that. Now, the cone of uncertainty deals with time frames for scenarios. 6 months to 2 years is a short-term scenario. This is called event-based. When 9/11 hit, that was an event-based scenario. It had a major impact. COVID is an event-based time frame, 6 to 24 months. Medium term is 5 years for a company. Long term is 20 years, and very long term, 50 years. Companies that are dealing with climate change scenarios, that is a 50-year time frame. But the great thing about scenarios, it gives you a framework to work within the uncertainty to generate those insights that can help you move forward. But scenarios is a process-driven strategy, not an optimization strategy. An optimization strategy, you're looking for the one strategy that's going to work. Well, I've got bad news for you. In this environment, when everything is changing so quickly, By the time you find an optimization strategy, it's too late. Everything's already changed, and now you're stuck. You're constantly reacting. You will never get caught up. Scenarios is a process-driven strategy. The optimum strategy doesn't work, but with scenarios and the process, you will generate robust strategies that you can implement immediately. Brigitte and I have been implementing robust strategies since March, and has had a major impact on our business. All right, so let's talk about what scenarios are not. Scenarios are not forecasting. Forecasting is incredibly dangerous because you're betting, oh, I have a great forecast. Even weather forecasters with weather satellites, they often screw up. So forecasting is not scenarios. And don't bring in forecasting by the back door by assigning a probability of this scenario coming to pass, that scenario coming to pass. Forecasting is not it. Scenarios is a process and content-driven strategy. Next slide. All right,
Let's go through the
Brigitte, over to you.
Yes, thank you, John. Let's go through the 8 steps that we're going to lead you through here as well. The 8 steps of the scenario building process. Step number 1 is identifying your focal issue or decision. Step number 2 is the key forces in the local environment. Step number 3 is looking at the driving forces and identifying them. Step number 4, ranking by importance and uncertainty. Step number 5, selecting the scenario logics. Step number 6, fleshing out the scenarios. Step number 7, the implications. And step number 8, the selection of the leading indicators and the signposts. We are going to lead you through these 8 steps in the upcoming 60, 70 minutes or so. So you might ask yourself, where does NLP come in all of this? It is written all over it. We as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as organizational leaders, when you have the knowledge of scenario planning, you have a head start. NLP is all about choice and flexibility. NLP is all about knowing the tools and how to implement them. And this is why we're here, and this is what we're giving you, and we're going to add NLP strategies as we teach this course moving forward. Let's look at the reframing. If you've ever taken any NLP program, you know a little bit about the importance of reframing. Reframing is seeing the current situation from a different perspective, from a different point of view, which can be very helpful in any situation that you might be in, specifically if you're looking to solve a problem, when you are making a decision, when you're continuing to learn. Reframing is helping you, your organization, the other person, to be more constructively moving from one situation which you feel stuck or confused in, and looking at it from a different angle, and sometimes it's just a slight turn. Often we like to bang our heads against the wall and try to do the same thing over and over again, telling ourselves the same thing over and over again, where it actually just needs a little turn, or it needs a step aside. We're going to talk about association and disassociation. Reframing on the organizational level is called scenarios. So that's where NLP comes in again. Scenarios are a process tool, and scenarios are also a content tool. It's a way of gaining a new perspective on the world that it is in now. And the more you are prepared, the quicker you can shift, the quicker you can pivot. And that's what John and I have done at the beginning of this year in March. Scenarios are the best way we know of reframing how the organization thinks about a strategy. This is strategic reframing. John.
Good. One of the things I want to mention that so people don't overlook it. When you go through the scenario process and you develop those robust strategies, you can act now. Brigitte and I have been in major action mode since March. That has given us at least a 6-month head start over our competitors. This is what's possible for you too when you go through the scenario planning process. So step number 1 of the scenario planning process is to identify the focal issue or decision. Now remember, the quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers. And you get your questions right, you're halfway there. So here are 2 key questions you need to ask yourselves in step 1 to identify the focal decision point. So what will the decision makers at your company be thinking hard about in the new future? Now, even if you're just a solopreneur, you're the decision maker. So what will decision makers at your company be thinking hard about in the new future or the near future? Question number 2. What are the decisions that have to be made that will have a long-term influence on the future of the company? So many people are in just reaction mode. They're reacting, and they aren't making those core decisions that they need to navigate their company going forward. So question number 2 helps you get to that. What are the decisions that have to be made that will have a long-term impact or influence on the future of the company? Now let's pivot over to step number 2. Brigitta?
Let's look at the key forces in the local environment and looking at the trends versus the driving forces. And I'd like to visualize it with looking at streams versus rivers. So trends are like streams. A trend is something that we try to catch, something that we try to jump on. But if a trend is like a stream, and it is like a stream, then it can be blocked, or even worst case, it'll run dry. So following the latest trend in business is a risky thing to do. You don't want to be trendy, you want to be robust. You want to focus on the driving forces. You want to focus on the river. Even though if this is the Mississippi River, there's industry that is relying on this river, and this river is not going to go anywhere. Even if we would try to straighten the river would still find its way. So be a driving force like a river. Be powerful, be unstoppable, be robust. Let's look at the step number 3.
All right, so we go from step number 2 to step number 3, the driving forces. Now, driving forces are things that impact your business, but you have no control over them. Back to the image of the river. Rivers are driving forces. They are inevitable. Look how big that ship is, that barge going down the Mississippi River. It is predominantly controlled by the power of the river. These are driving forces that impact your business, but you have no control over them. Advance a couple more slides, Brigitta. Now, driving forces are also uncertain, and we're going to go here to the iceberg. Now, the iceberg has 3 components: events, patterns, and structure. Notice, structure is below the waterline. Remember, icebergs, the majority of it is beneath the waterline. Only 1/8 is above the waterline. So you're looking for the deep structure, the driving forces in your business at the structural level. So when you look at the structural level of this iceberg, what are some of the key driving forces that are impacting your business? Remember, you have no control over them, but you're not getting caught up in events, trends, or patterns. You're looking at the structural level. And in step number 3, you write down what those driving forces could be for your industry and your business. Brigitta, over to you to step number 4.
Yeah, let's rank them by importance and uncertainty. So driving forces must be ranked by importance and uncertainty. And the point is to identify 2 or 3 factors or driving forces, as John said, that are most important and most uncertain. Occasionally, you will have maybe one driving force. So you must choose, because as people, as humans, we fear uncertainty. I mean, we've lived it the past 9 months, right? We know what uncertainty feels, looks, and sounds like. It is for you to be prepared, because one thing is certain: there will be another uncertainty. The scenario process empowers you, your company, to work with that uncertainty. So with the scenario process, you will be more certain. Let's look at the scenario logics. In
Good.
step
So
number,
go
go
on.
ahead.
Scenario logics. Keep going, Brigitta. You're on fire.
I'm on a roll. In step number 4, you identify driving forces that were most important and most uncertain. In step number 5 now, we'll cover the scenario logics. You may have 1, 2, or maybe 3 driving forces, and once the fundamental axes of crucial uncertainties have been identified, you can present them in 3 ways. You can present them as a continuum, that's 1 driving force. You can present them as a matrix, that's 2 driving forces, or you can present them as a volume, that's 3 driving forces. And here's the example of the continuum, which is 1 driving force. We're going to give you the other examples as we move into the other scenario logics. John.
One other thing on this continuum, ladies and gentlemen, notice scenarios gives you a framework to deal with the uncertainty. It's not so big that's impossible. Now you have something to work with. With 1 key driving force, now you have a continuum. We're going to now go into the other 2 formats based off of driving forces. So scenario logics. If you have 2 axes, 2 driving forces, driving force number 1, driving force number 2, now you have a matrix. You have 4 scenarios to work with. You have now put a boundary on the uncertainty, which allows you and your company to work within it. It's now not, oh my gosh, it's so uncertain. You've bound it. We now have 4 scenarios to work with in a matrix, but there's something else you can often add to a matrix. That's called the, next slide, the wild card scenario. The wild card scenario is outside of the traditional scenario matrix, but it is plausible, credible, and you need to work with it. So typically, it's been my experience that most companies can only handle 4 or 5 different scenarios. But again, with the scenario logics, you have 2 driving forces with a matrix. Next slide. All right, now if you have 3 driving forces, you have a volume. You have an X, a Y, and a Z axis. But that generates 9 different scenarios. Now, 9 different scenarios are theoretically possible, but it's logistically challenging. Each scenario needs to be distinct. And with 9 scenarios, they start blurring into one another. And with all the resources that Royal Dutch Shell has, we're talking a multi-billion-dollar multinational company. They couldn't get a scenario volume with 9 different scenarios to work. So this, we're talking voice of experience here. So you're going to be working with either a continuum or a matrix, but it's the distinctiveness of the scenarios which are key, so you can more fully associate into them and get the stories behind them. Brigitta, over to you.
Yeah, let's talk about stories. There's a huge power in stories. And if you are in business, you already know that stories are more powerful than any facts. So the stories from an NLP point of view give you clues. The stories, when you are running your stories and you're identifying your stories, there are also clues to strategies that are hidden within those stories. Elements of a good story from an NLP perspective are they're very applicable. They are they're, as I said, there are clues within those stories. So ask yourself, what kind of stories is your company, or you as an entrepreneur, as you as a team leader, what stories is your company as a whole running? And then also on an individual level, what stories are you running on? Are the stories powerful? Are the stories very specific? Do they give you insights? Are the stories relatable? Are the stories supportive? Are the stories non-supportive? Those are all clues. So getting clear on your stories on an organizational level and on an individual levels gives you clues, strategies, and makes it more applicable.
One other thing I would like to add about stories is some stories companies are running are outdated or even obsolete. This might have been their success formula, their success story prior to pandemic hitting. And guess what? If they're still running an old story, an old pattern that is no longer working, they are going to lose. That's why with the scenario process, it's strategic reframing of the entire business. And when you strategically reframe it, now you can generate new stories that are empowering, new stories that are going to work within the scenarios so you and your company can be more and more successful. So what stories is your company running? Some of them are obsolete. All right, next slide. Now, speaking of stories, we're working on step number 6 on fleshing out the scenarios. All right, a story has to come to life. You must flesh it out. So continuum, you've got the one driving force. What stories? How do you flesh those out? Then on the matrix, next slide, you've got 2 driving forces. But the great news about the logistics behind fleshing out the stories with a matrix, each story becomes a distinct narrative. Remember, you are wind tunneling your business in the scenarios. So how does your business do in scenario number 1? You're wind tunneling it. It might do okay. In scenario number 2, it may absolutely nosedive. In other ones, it could go either way. Some scenarios, when you're fleshing out the logics and you wind tunnel it in, you're going to get the deer in the headlights that, oh my gosh, if this comes to pass, we are in deep trouble. So the scenario matrix is how do you do that? But you're creating a narrative. How do you create that narrative? There are 2 key questions you need to ask for fleshing out the scenarios. 1, how would the world get from here to there? How would the world get from here to there? What events might be necessary to make the end point of this scenario plausible? Go back to the previous slide, Brigitta, please. See, look, driving force number 1 in the lower left-hand column. How would the world get from here to there? Scenario number 1, how would the world get from here to there with these 2 driving forces in the various scenarios? That is how you flesh out the scenarios. Next slide, please. Because remember, plausibility is essential. And your scenarios have to be internally consistent. So your left brain and right brain can agree that it's plausible and credible. And once you have that, you can associate into the scenario to get the robust strategies that are coming out of it. For example, you couldn't have a scenario with high inflation and low price goods. That's inconsistent. So when you're looking at the scenario logics, they must be plausible, credible. But once you do that, you're building in the strength into the scenarios. You're fleshing out the scenario logics. So the real benefits are coming to you. Now, one thing I'm going to be very clear with you, ladies and gentlemen, there are 8 steps in the scenario planning process. It's not a quick fix. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And especially at times like these, the ability to identify those robust strategies and move into action immediately is a huge competitive advantage for your business. While everybody else is, bleh. One other thing I would like to mention, there's a very powerful quote. It goes like this: the learned will inherit the earth, not the learners, excuse me. The learners will inherit the earth, not the learned, because the learned are prepared for a world that no longer exists. So many businesses, all their business plans and everything else are fine for pre-COVID, but guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Whatever the new normal is, and that's a myth, it ain't coming back. So you better go through this process so you can have strategies that are going to work. Brigitta, over to you.
Let's talk about association and disassociating into the scenarios. So associating into the scenarios, you want to be in it. You want to not just like on this picture, look from the outside in, that would be disassociating. You want to live it. You want to not just logically from the outside take some notes and write out what you think might be logically happening. You want to be in it. You want to be associated from an NLP perspective. You want to get this visceral reaction. You want to have these emotions coming up as you're associated and you're playing through these scenarios, because logically that's one part of the equation, but the gut reaction that's going to come out of it as you are associated going through your scenarios is what's going to really give you more insight, more knowledge from a gut reaction, from an emotional and physical reaction to what's happening. So you can get better feedback on how does this apply? How does the scenario apply? And then you also want to disassociate yourself. You do want to step back. You want to disassociate out of the scenario and look at it from the outside. You want to disassociate from an NLP perspective to then look at where are you in the process. So it's not just one or two. You want to, the scenarios allow you to toggle between the two, the association, living in the world of the scenario, to really generate those strategies, to get those visceral reactions, and then also disassociate, where you can evaluate and then prioritize the strategies to actually go through them more logically. So let's talk about more in the observation on associated and disassociation, John.
Sure. So when you're fully associated into a credible and plausible scenario, now you're going to get those gut level reactions. The gut level reactions are going to lead you to generate strategies that will give your business competitive advantages. The thing is, it can't be an academic exercise. If it feels academic and you can't be associated into it, you haven't done your job right. When you fully associate into a scenario, you're going to get sometimes like, oh my gosh, if this comes to pass, my business is done. You're going to get those. And then, well, what can I do to help my company survive and even thrive? The good news about the scenarios is it allows you to pretend that you have 100% crystal ball, 100% accurate crystal ball. This one scenario is coming to pass. Great. Now fully associate into it. And when you're fully associated into it, what strategies can I use to not only survive, but thrive? And then step back, disassociate from scenario number one, and fully associate into scenario number two. What scenario, what strategies can you generate in that particular scenario? This gives you options. Remember NLP, the law of requisite variety? The person with the most flexibility controls the system. With the scenario process, you have the law of requisite variety for organizations. The organization with the most options has the most flexibility to control the system, because rigidity is deadly now. It's never been a good strategy to begin with, but now it is deadly. So you're going to have those options. And the great news is once you have those robust options, you can implement immediately and don't have to worry about the uncertainty. These strategies are going to work. Brigitta, let's talk about scenario-specific implications.
Yes, let's do. So remember, your goal is to generate at least 10 strategies for each scenario. So I'm giving you a little visual for a spreadsheet that you can create. So write out at least 10 strategies for your scenario that you came up with, and then rank them. Rank your strategies for each scenario. So ranking strategies for a specific scenario, there's an A strategy, a B strategy, or a C strategy. So in the second column here, you can say A, B, or C. So this form will help you to name a specific scenario at the top. You can have, several of these pages. You can have 1, 2, or 3. And column A, you're going to list your strategy that you generated for this specific scenario. And then in column B, you're going to give your ranking of A, B, or C.
One thing I would like to add about the
Yes.
A, B, and C on that is you are just generating strategies. You're just eliciting, well, we could try this. We could do this. That might work. This might work. You're just writing. And after you've elicited as many as you can, and that's why in a strategic conversation is essential, because other people may have some insights that you don't have that will allow you to generate additional insights. Remember the deer in the headlight process? When Brigitta and I went through the scenario planning process with our own businesses, there was one scenario and Brigitta's like, I'm stuck. What do? I don't know how to move forward. With a strategic conversation, additional insights, I was able to give her some that then generated more strategies that Brigitta could use for her own business, the NLP Center of Atlanta. So remember, you're just going to elicit as many as you can and then rank them A, B, or C. But we want you to really dig deep. Go for at least 10 strategies per scenario, because once you start digging deep, then you're going to find, aha, this one is really good. This strategy is really advantageous for my business, because that level of thought, that deep level strategy, you can implement with competitive advantage over your rivals in the business. Let's go further on to the implications, Brigitta. Next slide. Now, you are looking for robust strategies that work across multiple scenarios. All right. So you had your scenario sheet from scenario 1, strategy sheet for scenario 2, 3, and 4. Now you list all of them on this scenario option matrix, and then you rank them. How does this particular strategy work in scenario number 1? You're going to rank it from a +1, +2, +3. It works really, really well. Or -1, 2 minuses, or 3 minuses. That means bad to disaster. You just list all of your strategies across multiple scenarios, and then you step back. Which strategies work in 3 or 4 scenarios? Those are the robust strategies that you can implement immediately. Back in March, Brigitta and I generated several robust strategies. I generated 20 for my business. I've already implemented 6 of them in 6 months. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying what's possible for you. Our competitors that are still trying to get their head around what's going on, that's their problem. This is a huge advantage to you. So you find the robust strategies that work in 3 or 4 scenarios. Now, if you do find a strategy that only works in 1 or 2 scenarios, first of all, you have to be very careful. That could be a bet the company strategy. Whenever I see in the business press, the CEO essentially bet the company, that's gambling. That's not being a risk manager. That's not using scenarios. Because remember, driving forces are things that have major impact and you have no control over. So if you're doing a bet the company strategy, good luck to you. However, you don't just throw out a strategy that works in one or two different scenarios. You can step back and ask, what little tweaks or refinements could I use with this strategy to make it more robust? Well, if it can go from 2 to 3, bingo. Now you've got a more robust strategy to work with. So this is the scenario option matrix. But the thing is, it has other scenario planning. Just doesn't work for businesses, small, medium, or large. It can even work for countries. You have the next slide. All right. Now, this is the scenario option matrix that the South African government was going through at the end of apartheid. They got all the people in the government. What are various scenarios? And they came up with 4 scenarios for the fate of the country. There was the ostrich, do nothing, stick our heads in the sand. Okay. There was lame ducks. There was the Icarus. Remember, Icarus flew too close to the sun and his wings melted and he crashed. And then there was flamingos. Remember, flamingos fly in formation. They went through all their strategies to see which one was more robust for them. And at the end of the apartheid regime, they started moving towards and generating the strategies that would work in more robust scenarios. So don't just think this only can work for big oil companies like Shell. It can work for small, medium, and large companies and even countries. All right, next slide. Now, Brigitta, any comments on this before we keep going? Because again, you've been through the scenario process and it's helped me teach it to students.
Yes,
Some observations.
I do want to add a few things because, you know, once we have gone through our strategies and our scenarios for the NLP Center of Atlanta, we were immediately to switch into and continue to take action on a very defined and actionable in a very defined and actionable way, which gave me and the company a huge head start into the pandemic. And I'll tell you why I say that. I'm following some of my competitors that are here in the United States and abroad. And one very large competitor actually posted on social media in about, I think it must have been around June or July this year, and said, look, my entire company just went almost belly up because I was not prepared. I mean, you know, kudos to him for being vulnerable enough to say that, but clearly he was not prepared. And you have a huge head start when you are prepared. And the time is right now. It's no longer wait, because we don't know how much longer this pandemic's going to go. So the time is right now, and the clarity that you're getting with the scenarios is absolutely profound and beautiful, that you can then immediately take actions. Actually, I was so associated once I got unstuck, and that was with that conversation that I had with John. That's where coaching comes in, right? So John and I have this conversation, which was a very conversational, strategic coaching session. And because I was so associated, I was so in it. And then I also was disassociated, writing out some notes. That same day I got into action, and I took action, and it led me even more into the future and into more success. So when people ask me, you know, how has this pandemic been treating you and your business, I go, actually really, really well, because I was prepared. And so are you, because you're watching this and you're on this call.
Uncertainty equals opportunity. That's what people miss. Uncertainty equals opportunity, but the only way you can work with uncertainty to make it more manageable is to bound it into the scenario format. Now it's workable. Brigitta mentioned one of her largest competitors almost went belly up. Now that shows a total reshuffling of the industry. Now, if that company almost went belly up, it's going to take them months, if not at least a year, to try to get back to where they were before. But the thing is, I could just from that point, they were probably so wedded to their old narrative. They selectively, remember, NLP is filter, delete, distort. They filter, deleted, and distorted all the other evidence that, hey, this is coming. Hey, what do we do about things? All of that was ejected, pushed aside, because it didn't fit the company narrative, the company truth, the strategy. Oh, it's going to come and go in 6 weeks. One thing I didn't share with you is this is my second pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. I worked and lived in Taiwan in 2003 during the SARS epidemic. So this is my second go around. So some of the lessons I learned there, I applied here and am applying here. So just think about it. If one of the biggest competitors in the industry almost went belly up, that gives you a huge opportunity. Everything is in play now, but the only way to take advantage of everything being in play is with the scenarios process. Next slide. All right, we talked about robust strategies. All right, now from here, we can go into leading indicators. All right, now one thing I would like to go back one more slide, Brigitta, to robust. When you and I had that conversation, when the coaching conversation, the strategic conversation, and you were stuck within that day, the next day, were you able to take action on some pretty effective, robust strategies for your business?
Immediately.
And how did that feel
clear.
compared to where you were before that?
Oh, it felt empowering because I'm like, okay, I actually have options. It's not grim pessimism. It's not I'm stuck in front of a wall that I don't know how to get around or over. It's now I have actionable steps that I was immediately take action on. And I did. I wasted no time. And that gave me that leap that really set me apart.
Great.
Because of those robust strategies, I want to talk about Taiwan really quick. Because they have gone through SARS and because they have gone through those scenarios, they were also prepared, the country of Taiwan.
Let me explain. Because we're going to talk about leading indicators, signposts, Taiwan's a country of 23 million people. Only 400 people have died from COVID. 23 million people. Now, the thing is, they were interviewed that said, we have been preparing for this for 17 years. Remember, SARS was 2003. COVID-19, they've been preparing for it for 17 years. They were going to implement immediately. They looked at the early warning, the signposts we're going to get into. A strange pneumonia-like thing started appearing in Wuhan. Boom. They pivoted to it. Anyway, next slide.
Let's go into the selection of leading indicators
and signposts. Now, leading indicators and signposts, these are things to monitor in an ongoing way, showing where things are going. Because remember, a scenario is a narrative. What are the signposts that this narrative is coming to pass? Well, back in May, in SARS, 6 months it was gone. But in the United States, in May and in Europe, what did we see? People for the Memorial Day weekend, all hanging out on the beach. People in the south of France, hanging out on the beach. People in Spain, hugging and kissing each other, which is a cultural norm. We get all that. But what happened? Well, we knew what was coming. So we pivoted. So what are the leading indicators and signposts? If chosen carefully, the company will gain a jump on the competition. This becomes your company's early warning system. Now remember, if the scenarios have been built according to the previous steps, what you build into the scenarios will allow you to get out of them. So the logical coherence that you build into the scenarios will allow the logical implications to be drawn out of it. You can be aware of signposts, leading indicators for your industry or the economy as a whole, and then move on it. Let's go into the Q&A section. We've got some Q&As. So please, you can unmute yourself. You can unpicture yourself. That's an interesting term. You can go to live and you can ask us some questions. Mia, Kendall,
Jennifer,
Melissa?
and Jennifer put in the chat box, this is very informative and helpful. I have another meeting at 1 and we'll need to log off. Please send me recording. Okay, Jennifer, we will do that. I'm making sure. We got a few more minutes, Jennifer. So if you,
Thank you.
have any questions, we definitely will send you the recording as well.
So Jennifer, if you're off in 10 minutes, we can take one quick question from you before you pivot.
Thank you. Actually, so this was a really helpful for me because the pandemic was the reason why I pivoted into my other business, which was actually very dormant. And it's a supply company. We do medical office and janitorial supply. So as you can imagine, it really is demanding a lot of my time and focus. And it definitely, we're taking advantage of the trend of this creek. But what I'm looking for in the long term is to really leverage this opportunity for us, although it's a tragic one, to build and prepare for the long term, and especially with the new life that we're going into. You know, things that were considered only for hospitals and medical facilities and medical and within the healthcare are now becoming the norm commodities in our communities.
Excellent. And one thing I would like to know, that business that you said had been dormant for a while, that was actually an option. You weren't aware of it. It was an option that you had in your back pocket to then pivot to and implement once the pandemic hit. But this is not a trend. The pandemic is a driving force.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
It's a driving force. It's been impacting the entire globe. That is what a driving force does. That is no trend. So you can take what you've learned from your company, but then you wind tunnel it in the scenarios, and then you can have even more robust strategies. So how do you pivot from just dealing with stuffy pharmacies and stuffy hospitals and how they purchase things into more retail, more mainstream? How do we pivot so you're not hitting them with all the jargon that the purchasing managers love to talk about, but it'll make the retail people, the business people, their eyes glaze over and like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what's possible with scenarios. Jennifer?
And that's actually funny you say that, because although we're a wholesale company and we work business to business, we're actually working on posting vending machines that have PPE products. And renting them out to different retail locations that have foot traffic where they're going to need those.
Fantastic. So what is that? It's another channel of distribution. That is something, but you say, funny that you say that. It's not funny, because with our scenario framework, what are the driving forces? That gave me focusing on the context, not the content, to ask that question. That came from the scenario logics. So once you have those and are wind tunneling your business, yeah, vending machines are great. That's another channel of distribution. But how are you marketing it? How are you languaging it? PPE, that is XYZ. So your personal protective equipment. All that stuff will now give you the framework to be more effective from it. So now you've got a brand new channel of distribution potentially for a new channel for your business. But then how do you interact with those retailers? How are you renting the space? What is your negotiation process? All that dynamic is going to come out from wind tunneling your business with the scenarios, because if you're a wholesaler working with end user retailers, there's that middleman. How do you work with them? What's your language? What's your strategy? All that can then be put through the scenario framework. That's just what we do.
I want to
Awesome.
share really quick one of the scenario framework that we did with one of our clients. And she is in real estate. You know, this doesn't apply to Jennifer, but if you are in real estate, this is one snakes in the basement scenario that we did. And we've created several scenarios with different clients that have gone through the scenario workshop with us. Must have been June or July this year.
It was June. Mm-hmm.
June, yeah.
Gotta go. Bye, guys.
Bye, Jennifer.
Bye, Jennifer.
We'll
I'll
send you the recording.
So this is what's possible, right? And we work with you through your own scenarios, just so you get a good visual of what we've been doing so far as well. Other questions?
I honestly don't have any question. However, I could really relate in terms of your guys providing this valuable material. And definitely with COVID, we lost a lot, but also gained a lot. So what I can relate with gaining a lot is definitely a time. So I don't have to travel an hour or 2 hours to my work and then 2 hours back. So I gained 4 hours. But now this made me think, okay, how are you using those additional 4 hours? What has been done? Like, you have been complaining for those 4 hours, and now when you got them, what did you actually did with that? So in that term, it made me a little bit go back and reflect and start redoing some stuff, but definitely does change the scenario in terms of how are you approaching your business now? How are you communicating with your clients now? I know that a lot of things in terms of are missing, like body language mostly. Even through the camera, you can see only the half of a person. And I again go back to the picture, my favorite picture of alligator, where you can see the upper part, but you can't see the bottom part. And I'm not saying that the clients are the alligators. However, sometimes a lot of communication can also be seen through how a person is sitting, whether their feet are, I don't know, if they're nervously like, how would you say that?
Just kind of
bouncing,
fluttering or
whatever.
bouncing.
Yeah, so a lot of things are in a way connecting and having. However, I do believe that going out of this pandemic, once we go out from this pandemic, we will definitely, in a way, be much more trained and focused on the details in terms of catching the body language, and because those are the things that are currently missing in our daily communication with the client.
Well, one thing I would like to mention is, remember, scenarios can be event-based. The pandemic is an event-based scenario. We're talking 6 months to 2 years. And realistically, 2 years is probably what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Brigitta? Or not Brigitta, any other questions from our audience members?
No, for me. Thank
you.
you.
I hear a dog that's got a question. Is that Magnus?
No, that's actually Mia's Coco. That's probably Coco.
Okay.
I would assume.
Yeah, that's Coco. Sorry.
That's Coco. Kendall, Christian, Kendall, you've gone through this now the second time round. Anything that comes up for you? Anything else that you saw?
No, I mean, the only comment I would share is just how powerful it is. You guys do a fabulous job in explaining it.
And it's all in the application.
Thank you for that. Christian, any thoughts, any feedback, anything from you? And I'm going to start, as Christian might or might not have thoughts or feedback. I will continue going through those eureka moments, because they will continue to come. Kendall, would that be fair to say that the eureka moments are continuing to show up?
Mm-hmm.
I know for me they are.
Yes.
I want to reiterate the 8 steps again and really going through them one more time. Step 1 is identifying the focal issue or decision. Step number 2, the key forces in the local environment. Step number 3, defining those driving forces. Step number 4, ranking by importance and uncertainty. Step number 5, selecting the scenario logics. Step number 6, fleshing out the scenarios. Step number 7, the implications. And then step number 8, the selection of the leading indicators and the signposts. So as you are going through more clarity, as you're becoming more clear and you are associated in your scenarios and then disassociated to make those very distinct notes and have even more clarity, coaching is a big part in scenarios. You're going to get more done when you are locking arms with a coach, when you are having those conversations, just like I had them with John Kurth, when you're open to receive, when you're open to really look at the uncertainty and you're looking at what are the possibilities, what are the opportunities, and then taking action, being able to reframe and having that open communication and doing whatever it takes once you have defined those scenarios. That's going to be, those points are going to be your best friend. So scenarios for the great discontinuity. Good Lord, that is always the hardest word. Developing the robust business strategies for the pandemic world. We are going to go through the scenarios: super germs, the war of attrition, the 4 horsemen, and the age of pandemics. We have a way, we have made little videos to make you, for you to be associated in these 4 scenarios: super germs, war of attrition, 4 horsemen, and the age of pandemics. We have an entire process laid out for you. And as Kendall just said, she has gone through it. It is very powerful. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. She's still becoming even more clear and is able to take very clear and distinct actions of what she has defined. So this is the importance of the scenario building. So let me go through the day ones, the days. There's 6 days of this course. Day 1 is a deeper dive into the construction of the scenarios, where you're going to learn more about the process of identifying the key drivers. You'll understand how these scenario drivers are the most important and most uncertain. We'll peel back the curtain on the scenario logics. You'll see why the logical coherence was built into these scenarios that build a coherent narrative for each scenario. So the more you're going to put into these scenarios, the more actionable business strategies that you can implement and take action on immediately, you're going to get out. You'll learn how to fully associate into the scenarios, how each scenario narrative is practically pulled straight from today's headlines. You'll learn more about the scenarios to create capability and portfolio options for your organization, for your business, because it's all about creating these robust strategies for your business. On day 2, we're going to kick off the scenario planning process to wind tunnel your business. The first scenario is super germs, an informative and yet shocking newscast, which we have created. Will have you rapidly be in this world and living in it, be fully associated. You'll be totally immersed and you'll feel as if you are living in it. We'll take you through that process, dig deeper, find strategies on the super germ scenarios. We'll have exercises that accompany the scenario that you can capture for your own strategies that will help your business thrive. On day 3, we're going to go through the scenario building process, because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So this scenario is the marathon for your business and the whole community. The second scenario is the war of attrition. Every day seems like a battle for your business survival, and it seems like you're competing with everyone for everywhere for everything. And you'll develop these business strategies that are built for the long haul. You'll learn the mindset of how to sustain the success day after day in the war of attrition. The virus and your competitors are playing the long game. If your business behaviors are knee-jerk reactions and reflect short-term thinking, you will lose, and you're set up to lose. And we're setting you up for success. Day 4, we're going to go through the scenarios that seem like a walk in the park. The previous ones are going to seem like a walk in the park. You really can't prepare for the scenario unless you have fully immersed yourself in it. So this scenario on day 4 will be the 4 horsemen. Andy Grover, former chairman and CEO of the Intel Corporation, said it best: only the paranoid will survive. You'll learn you'll learn how to develop strategies that work well in what seems like a complete and utter chaos. You can move forward with confidence. You'll be able to keep your head on straight where everyone else is losing theirs. We're going to do that in the 4 horsemen. On day 5, is your business ready for the wild card scenario? In this scenario, everything you have once learned was certain is not anymore. The wild card scenario is this scenario that we're going to take you through, and it is the age of pandemics. And this wild card scenario, all bets are off. Other business owners are using the bet the company strategy, and they are losing. Bet the company strategies are for amateurs. You are not an amateur, that's why you're here. On the other hand, you are the business leader. You are here, you are continuing to learn. As part of this scenario, you'll develop meta, macro, and micro strategies that will bring you results. On day 6, the robust strategies and leading indicator, where you're defining your robust strategies that you work across the multiple scenarios. You'll be able to take action with confidence after you have identified these robust strategies. You'll also learn how to identify the leading indicators that will give you a jump start and a jump on your competition. The logical coherence that was built into the scenarios will allow logical implications to be drawn out of the scenarios. So the scenarios: developing robust business strategies for the pandemic world. It's 6 days. As I just said, I went from day 1 all the way through day 6 of what we're going to cover. It's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday 1 week, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the next week, starting January 12th. It will be at 9 o'clock Pacific time, 12 o'clock Eastern time, 1 hour, and there will be success work in between. So you will be in contact with John and myself between each of those sessions, and they are building on top of each other. It's not just one or the other day. It must be all 6 days. They build on each other and they rely on each other, all of the information that we are giving you. So it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, January 12th, 13th, and 14th. And then the week after that, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday again, January 19th through the 21st. We start at 9 o'clock Pacific time, which is 12 o'clock Eastern time, and we go for about an hour. There will be success work that we're sharing with you. Other people have paid $2,500 for this course, and our leaders are leading other leaders and are also learners, and therefore we are passing on this course for a very discounted rate for $997. This is today's online investment. Space is very limited. We don't just take anyone. We work one-on-one with you as you go through this course. So we only take a few select people that will be able to come on this course in January. So when you're ready, type in the chat, "I am in." As you are watching the recording, go ahead and send us an email to info@NLP Atlanta. In the subject line, write "I'm in scenarios." Subject line, "I'm in scenarios." and just give us a quick overview of who you are, and send us an email, and we will get back in touch with you. Just again, an overview: developing your robust business strategies for the pandemic world. Today's online investment, $997, starts January 12th at 9 o'clock Pacific, 12 o'clock Eastern. We will have another scenarios course in March. When we're ready to announce those dates, we will announce those dates. Right now, we're focusing on the January 12th one, but no, there's another one coming in March. John, that was it from my end. Thank you guys for being on. Thank you for taking great notes. John, thank you for bringing your incredible knowledge as always. Any last parting words?
This is one of the best investments you're going to make in your business, because you're going to be getting that clarity and focus to generate those robust strategies and just move and keep growing your business. Brigitta, over to you.
Thank you. And Kendall had to jump off, and she says, I have to leave on another call coming in. Amazing content. Yes, Kendall, you know what we're talking about, and I wouldn't be surprised if she would go through the content again. Thank you for being on. I'm going to put here again in the chat, info@nlpatlanta.com. In the subject line, write I'm in scenarios. And then in the body of the email, put in your signature, and we will get back in touch with you immediately. Thank you for being on. Make it a great weekend. See you guys in January. Bye for now.
Thank you. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.